Milwaukee's scoring a lot of runs. I mean, a lot of runs. It's kind of amazing, really. I just don't know if they can keep it up. And they have been dealt some tough blows with pitching injuries and such. So I think the world of the Brewers, just the way they get the most out of their roster. Don't get me wrong. I'm not writing them off. If you listen to this show over the last few years, you know that I'm someone who has a lot of respect for the Brewers and continue to be amazed how they have more success than the Cardinals despite being at a huge payroll disadvantage. So, but I just don't know if they can hold on this year. We'll see. Long way to go. About 130, 131 games. Cubs still seem like the team to beat, although we talked to USA Today's Gabe Locks the other day, and he's not a Cubs guy in terms of picking them to win the division. So we'll see. There's a lot to be said about all these teams. I think Pittsburgh's been fading. Well, they have been fading, and maybe the worm is turned, and it's going to be hard for them to pick it back up. Who knows? The Cincinnati Reds mystify me a little, too, because they score a lot of runs, and their pitching isn't bad, but their record should be better than it is. And it's a strange team because they show you that home runs really matter, because if you look at the Reds in terms of their batting average and their on-base percentage, you know, they're way down there in the National League rankings, just like the Cardinals are. But my point being, because the Reds can hit home runs and they hit a lot of doubles, it offsets all the weak parts of their offense, where the Cardinals have the weak parts of their offense, getting on base, hitting for power, batting average, but they can't offset that because they just simply don't hit enough home runs. And going into today, and the Cardinals are off, the White Sox will be here for 3 games this weekend, but going into today, the Cardinals are now last in the National League in runs per game, and they are last in the National League in home runs, and they're 13th or 14th in all the other offensive categories. So they have smacked the bottom in terms of an offense that has just been awful. They have reached bottom. Offensively, can they start to rise? Can they put some things together and get out of that basement, get out of the muck? I don't know. Little stirring from Goldie and Arenado. I mean, that's encouraging to see. But then again, Arenado's got 1 home run since last August 19th. It's a home run game as much as so many people just want to be resistant to that and deny it. It is a home run game. And if you don't hit home runs, you are really going to have an incredibly difficult time to score. I mean, score more than, just 2-3 runs a game. And that's what the Cardinals have been doing. So we'll see. I mean, the Cardinals got to get things rolling offensively. And why am I talking so much about the offense? Well, because everything else is working relatively well. I mean, I went and looked at the numbers today, and you may have heard me talk about this, through the week, and I'll just mention it briefly right now. The Cardinals and the Brewers are basically even when it comes to runs allowed per game. Like the Brewers are a smidge better, but it's nothing to even talk about because it's like a fraction better. They both allow about 4.4 runs per game. Brewers a little bit better at 4.40 as opposed to like 4.48. Big deal. It's about the same. The Cardinals have a better defense than the Brewers, although the Brewers' defense is good if we're going by defensive run saved. They're both like around the same area, so let's just call it a draw. The run prevention is a draw. The defense is a draw. The ERA is very similar. The Cardinals actually have more quality starts than the Brewers, starting pitching. And the Cardinals lead the National League with an 85% save percentage. And the Brewers are down the list at 61%. So why am I telling you all this stuff? Is because it's something I'm repeating this week. The team that's in first place in the National League Central is Milwaukee. They're 19-11, and they lead the Cardinals by 5.5 games. They lead the Cardinals by 5.5 games, even though the Cardinals are equal to the Brewers in runs allowed. They're equal to the Brewers, a little better than the Brewers on defense. They are getting more quality starts from their rotation than the Brewers are, and their bullpen has locked up more leads than the Brewers' bullpen has without blowing those leads. There's only one thing that separates the two teams, and that's the offense. And so I'm going to try like hell to be disciplined and keep my eye on the ball. Because, there's all the people just like, well, the manager shouldn't have, he should have used this bullpen guy instead. Or, I don't like the way the manager looks in the dugout. He looks smug. I told everyone they should have signed Yamamoto, all that nonsense. It has nothing to do with where the teams are today. It's all about the offense. The offense is killing the Cardinals. They got enough of good stuff going on to where they could have a much better record and they could be looking a lot better in the standings. So don't get distracted about stupid things that have nothing to do with where this team is. It ain't about the pitching. It ain't about the defense. It ain't about the run prevention. It ain't about the fundamentals. Cardinals are real good in those areas, real solid. It's all about the offense, period. This is the worst offense that the Cardinals have had 31 games into a season since Bill DeWitt and his partners took over in 1996. I mentioned it earlier. I gave you the numbers this week. I ain't going to do it again because you don't want to hear me read numbers all day. But the Cardinals, this is a historically awful offense. And that's what's holding them down. That is what is holding them back. So I don't know why people talk about other crap that has nothing to do with why the Cardinals are under 500 and why they can't get to 500 and climb above it. Because the offense keeps pulling them down into the muck. That's why. It isn't because of the pitching. It isn't because of the defense. It isn't because of fundamentals. It isn't because of base running as in moving up and, advancing extra bases and all that. No, it's not that. It's not that at all. It's about how awful this offense is. And if they don't start to produce 4 or 5 runs on a consistent basis, 4 or 5 runs in a game on a consistent basis, they're dead. It's as simple as that. And you say, well, are you being a little dramatic? No, I'm not being dramatic because you just look at their, they've 19 times now this season, they've scored 3 runs or less, 3 runs or less, 19 times. So you know what their record is in those games? 5-14. That's why I said if they can't do better than that, they're dead. They're going to fade away. They're going to wither and go away. They got to start putting up 4 or 5 runs a game. You got a lot of teams. Well, you got a cluster of teams that are averaging over 5 runs a game. This one's got the lowest scoring offense in the National League. So anyway, keep your eye and focus on what really matters in explaining why this team is where it is in the standings. Now, some of you are going to say, I can hear you. I somehow can hear you. It's amazing. I can hear you even though you may be in Chesterfield or you may be in South County. Maybe you're even down there at Friendly Sports Bar and Grill. Maybe you're across the river in Metro East. I can hear your voice. It's amazing how I can hear your voice. Well, you don't talk about the ownership in the front office. Well, I do. In fact, I talk about that a lot. But today I'm talking about let's analyze the performance on the field. We know the front office is lacking. We know the front office had fallen behind the times. We know that the front office has misspent a lot of money on payroll. I know all that stuff. I've written it 1,000 times in the last few years. I'm talking about what's on the field right now once the season began and what they're doing in the actual competition. The front office and the ownership, totally different conversation, totally separate from the actual competition in real time in the 2024 season. And the state of the Cardinals offense is moribund, putrid, whatever you want to call it. It is the problem. It's the only major problem in terms of performance so far in 2024. So keep your eyes and focus on that. Quit looking over there, over here, looking down, looking up. Well, some guy tweeted this. He's right. And chances are whoever tweeted is like basically 75% wrong or whatever. Don't get distracted. You really got to realize it's all about the fact they're averaging 3.5 runs per game. They have scored 3 or fewer times, more than anyone in the National League, and the only one in the major leagues that have scored 3 runs or fewer more times. They'll be at Busch Stadium this weekend. The White Sox have done it 20 times, Cardinals 19. It's the offense. So anyway, those are my opening remarks. Jim Heuer, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I was talking to somebody last night, and we were talking about the numbers you gave out of how bad the offense is. And you may have mentioned this, and if you did, I'm sorry. But the person said to me, and that's with a DH, that this offense is even worse.
That's right. No, I didn't mention that. But it's like, that's a good add-on. It really is.
So, a lot of people are up in arms about this offense, much like yourself. And we'll see where it goes this weekend, because you got a terrible scoring team coming into town. 2 of 3 is the least that they can accomplish this weekend against the Sox.
I think the Cardinals got their best starters going this weekend, too, so that should help. Starting pitchers.
Yep.
You look at the Cardinals right now, and they got one guy slugging above 400. That's Wilson Contreras. How are you going to score?
Yeah, you can't
First
do
of all,
much with that.
First of all, their team on base percentage is just awful, and they don't have power, not much. And again, this is all relative to the other teams.
Mm-hmm.
So the Cardinals are in this vortex of like the worst possible factors. They don't get enough people on base. They're down near the bottom in Major League Baseball in terms of on-base percentage. So they don't get enough runners on base. They're not even close to getting enough runners on base. It's like really horrible. So you're not getting a lot of runners on base. The teams you're competing against are getting a lot of runners on base, most of them. But when you do get runners on base, well, what happens? You do a really bad job of getting them in. So, that's the worst possible combination you can have. Because if you had a lot of runners on base, a lot, and if you weren't even great, if your batting average wasn't, great, or you weren't consistent about getting runners in, you would have so many opportunities that you would probably get more runners home than you really deserve because, you're not consistent with runners in scoring position and all that stuff. But when you limit yourselves by having so few runners on base from game to game, 30% of the people that come to plate for the Cardinals this season, 30% have gotten on base. That's awful. It's awful. It's like 27th or so in the major leagues. But then when they're on base, too many times they stay there. There's a stat, and it is not mumbo jumbo. It is not esoteric. It is not fancy pants. It's a really simple number. You can find it at Baseball Reference. The Cardinals, like all the people that they've put on base this year, right? Only 27% of them have scored. That's 14th in the National League, and the only team worse is Pittsburgh, but it's like a virtual tie. Pittsburgh's at 26%. So the Cardinals have gotten only 27% of their runners home. It's awful. And one of the reasons, of course, is they don't hit home runs. And, every day when I talk about this stuff, it's like even today I posted a thing, which I'll tell you about in a couple of minutes, about how, it's just going to be hard to score a lot of runs if you're not hitting home runs, That's a fact.
True.
But people are some people, they're just so resistant to that. Well, it's because they rely too much on home runs. No, they don't. No, actually, no, they don't. Well, they rely on home runs because they need them, because every team needs them. The 4 lowest scoring teams in the National League are also the 4 teams that have the lowest home run total. You think that's a coincidence? Hell no. So there's always this resistance to this obvious thing, which is like, if you don't hit your fair share of home runs, your offense is going to stink. It's certainly not going to be good. People will, no matter how many times I write or say, there's always people pushing back, politely or otherwise. What is there to push back against? Every number that there is backs that up. Here's a number here's a stat that I put on Twitter earlier today, because I was like, wow, I knew it was bad, but wow. And this season, Goldschmidt and Arenado have combined for 3 home runs, and we're talking about 200 and some at bats. It's only 3, okay? The home runs they have hit, Goldschmidt and Arenado, who were first and third in the National League and in the MVP vote in 2022, which that's a pretty short time ago. The 3 home runs that those 2 guys have hit have produced 5 runs.
Oh, boy.
Both of Goldie's home runs were solo shots, and Arenado's only home run was a 3-run shot, which was good, but it's his only home run. Their home runs, those 2 guys, their 3 home runs, which is a problem, only 3, have only produced 5 runs. And so somebody out there going to say, well, it's not about the home runs. It's got to play some whitey ball. No, they can't play whitey ball. They can do a good job of playing small ball. They ain't a whitey ball team. They just ain't. I'm sorry. It's a different time. It's a different era. It's a different place. A Busch Stadium with carpet and a bunch of guys who can run like track stars. That's not now. And I had a guy today, and again he was polite, but he was just like, well, I think we make too much about home runs. They need to. It's not about home runs, and I agree to him from this standpoint. But his point was, you got to do this other stuff. You got to get a lot of hits. You got to do this. You got to do that. Well, I agree, except they're not doing those things. That's the point. The Reds don't do those things as much as you would think either. But the Reds do hit the home runs, like I mentioned, and that kind of offsets some of their flaws offensively, because they do a good job of knocking the ball out of the ballpark. And so they can score runs because they can score them in a hurry. They can score them 2 at a time, 3 at a time, whatever. So it's easy to say, well, the Cardinals need to do this. They just need to get hits. They need to draw walks. They need to get hits with runners in scoring position. They need to do this. They need to do that. I don't disagree. I'm just saying it ain't happening. So, you say, well, you got to rely on that instead. No, you can't rely on that instead, because it doesn't exist. Not in the way that would make your offense better. Right?
That's so true. You gave those numbers for Goldie and Arenado on home runs. Burleson's 2 home runs this week have given more damage than those 2 all season
That's right.
long.
Well, that's a great point, Jimmy. That's right.
Just another way of going, gee whiz, this is really worse than you thought.
And I did some homework today. The Cardinals are last in the major leagues, not surprisingly, because, they've they're 29th or actually I think they're last now in homers. Whatever. But the Cardinals are the worst team in the majors in terms of the number of runs that are produced by home runs. They've only scored 34 runs on homers this year. 34. Now, to add to that, or to subtract from that, they've hit 11. They've hit 21 homers. 11 have been solo shots, right?
Yeah. Oh.
So that means if you don't count the guy who hit the homer, if you don't count the RBI that comes because he drove in himself, right?
Yeah.
They've only driven they've only driven in 23 teammates on homers, because the other 11 were the guy himself scoring, the guy who hit the homer. So only 23 other players have scored when the Cardinals hit a home run this year. Only 23. Think about that.
That's where you're at right now with this offense. Texter said this to you, by the way, Bernie.
Yep.
Brewers on base percentage is .338. That's the team slugging percentage for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I know, and it's there's you know what the Brewers you know what the difference is between the Brewers and the Cardinals batting average and runners in scoring position? Do you know?
I do.
know.
Okay.
I do know. Hold on, let me get to her. It's pretty amazing because I knew there would be a gap, but it's really a gap. Let me just do it just real quick.
Sure.
This is Milwaukee, St. Louis. All right, Milwaukee's batting average is 38 points higher. Their batting average with runners in scoring position is 95 points higher.
Boy.
297 to 202. On base percentage is 38% higher. Slugging percentage is 38 points higher. Stolen bases 40 to 12. Milwaukee's got 20 more extra base hits than the Cardinals. And one that I did not mention, which I should have, and here again, it's only going to take me a minute here. Less than a minute. Never mind. So the Brewers have scored they've hit 38 home runs, which is tied for second in the National League. And the Cardinals are at the bottom with 21. So the Brewers have hit 17 more home runs. Right?
Oh my goodness, 17 more than Cardinals, and
That's why they're in first. Why they're ahead. That's why they're 5.5 games. That's why they're 5.5 games ahead of the Cardinals. And it's like, well, Ali Marmol should have brought in someone other than Libator, or he should have gotten Libator. Or it's like, what?
It's not why they're losing.
It's not why they're 5.5 games out, because. You know what? We could go to Pat Murphy and we could go to Craig Counsell in Chicago, Pat Murphy, the Brewers manager, and you can find games because the Brewers, for example, have blown 6 saves. I haven't looked up the Cubs, but we'll see. That's what I love about this stuff. People get all caught up; they get tangled up in the weeds, these little weeds. The Brewers have blown 6 saves this year. And I guarantee you Pat Murphy's made a pitching change or he's called in a bullpen guy who got lit up, or who Brewers fans would say, man, I think he made a mistake there. Yeah, it's called baseball. You realize how many decisions managers have to make on a daily basis? All of them. So we could go through every single team's games and find stuff to say, well, the manager kind of screwed up there. He should have brought in this reliever. Oh, he really messed up. He needed to remove the starter there rather than let him face another 2 or 3 hitters. We can go through that, and they're there. They're there. There's so many instances of that. You would just get bored trying to count them all up. That's what I'm talking about when I say, don't get distracted by little teeny-weeny things that really aren't moving the needle in terms of this team's record. Don't be writing a blog about how Ali Marmol is he's a clown because he didn't lift Libitor, or he's a clown because of this or that. That has nothing to do with why they trailed the Brewers by 5.5. Because if the Brewers have made some bad reliever pitching change decisions, the Cardinals have too. In other words, it kind of cancels each other out. Because every manager screws these things up. So you just expect that they will be screwing these things up. Every manager, every team. Some maybe a little more than the others, but they all make these screw-ups with like when to pull a reliever or whatever, when to pull a starter. That's not why the Cardinals are 5.5 games out. It's because they don't have an offense. Something just a little bit bigger. Just a little bit bigger than when, like, well, Marmol should have did this. Like, they pulled that pitcher sooner. And you'll have people talking about that for hours, you know? And it's like, no, Nimrod. That's not why they're under 500 and why they're trailing the Brewers by 5.5. Mr. Nimrod. See, at least I use Mr. Right?
Yeah.
Well, he's right. I don't know what to say.
Maybe the White Sox can help the Cardinals get a little healthy this week, huh?
Well, I would say that's an understandable thing to
we can all hope.
Anticipate, but hold on a second here now. But the old White Sox, not the Red Sox. So yeah, the old White Sox, they swept Tampa Bay, then they lost 3 in a row to Minnesota. So the old White Sox aren't very good. So you're absolutely correct, Jim Heuer. I mean, you should be able to count on them the Cardinals to win or sweep the series, because the White Sox are 6-25, and the Cardinals will have Gray and Lynn and Gibson going, I believe, right?
Yep, I believe that is correct.
So good chance they can throttle that White Sox offense. But the way the Cardinals are, I could look at Chicago's team ERA and say, oh, that's horrible. Does that really matter when you're facing the Cardinals? Seriously. Kenta Maeda came in that game yesterday with like a 5.59 ERA or something. You know?
Yeah, that was.
Does it really matter? These guys aren't good against anybody. Not real. Well, the occasional game, sure, but they're not good against anybody consistently. I don't even look at the other team's ERA anymore. It doesn't matter. This is about the Cardinals and the hitters who should be doing better. They're not, and they need to do it or forget about everything. You know?
Got to get after it. By the way, the Brewers are at the Cubs this weekend for.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, so
that'll be fun.
Keep an eye on that one.
How about if we take a little break here on the Bernie Show, get into a couple of other things. I'm glad that you are hanging out with us today, and there's always stuff to talk about, you know, and you got the Goldie and Arenado thing, and I know Arenado's hitting for average lately, and that's good. Goldie's been perking up. That's good. But is it going to turn into something big? Is it going to turn into something that lasts? I mean, that's another thing we got to look at. And if you can't get a lot more out of what you've gotten so far from Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker, you know, it's when you're two older guys who are Hall of Fame caliber players, you're not getting much out of them at all. And then your two future faces of the franchise, like your young stars, going to be leading the Cardinals to glory for years. When those two combined have done, I mean, to say they've done little is giving them too much credit. They've done next to nothing. Because if you think about Gorman, he's hit 4 home runs. 2 of them came in a blowout where the game was already over, that 10-3 game that Miami put on the Cardinals. he's had the one big home run, and the other one was kind of important, don't get me wrong, but they're going to need a lot more than that from him. Anyway, there's more than that, but you're in trouble, man, when your two old stars and your two would-be young stars are just not getting it done. That's my point.
There is a question from the text line for you.
Yes,
Bernie, where do you think Steven Matz will finish in the race? Or slash Spartacus, I should say.
That would be Spartacus Matz. That's the thoroughbred's formal name. Well, he had a setback in training earlier this week at Churchill. He was just doing his nice easy breeze workout, and not even in a full gallop, and he got kind of slowed up, and trainers and everyone were rushing to him and just making sure everything's okay. So he's probably going to be scratched, but they'll probably give him an MRI just to make sure, right? And I think with Spartacus Matz, the other thing is maybe the Cardinals, they might want to look into this idea to see if they can get permission from Major League Baseball to put blinders on him.
That might work, yeah.
I don't know. Now, there's some performance-enhancing things that you can't do that with them, right?
Correct.
So I can't suggest anything that might be nefarious. But if Bob Baffert was a pitching coach, he might be able to come up with some kind of stealth training, treatment methods. Who knows, right?
They could use that for Spartacus Matz.
Yeah, but when Spartacus Matz returns to the track, I'd like to see him running those sprint races where the endurance is not a factor. You don't want him running the distance. Something's going to go wrong, right?
It worked before when they tried that, so why not try it again?
Spartacus Matz. I was reading some stuff. It's interesting, man. Everybody's writing about this now. They're talking about how offense is way down. I was kind of stunned to see slugging percentage and home run rate down as far as it is so far. Mm-hmm. It could level off. Who knows? But there are years where once it sort of gets once you're like a month in, 6 weeks in, you're thinking, well, it'll level off, and it doesn't. And of course, you always have to wonder because Rob Manfred and all the chimpanzees in MLB headquarters, I could just see them. You see those commercials? Remember that commercial had the chimpanzees in the office around a conference table, and then they just start throwing things around and going nuts? Yeah. That's MLB. That's headquarters. Is it possible yet again, these people, since I use chimpanzees, I'll continue with the metaphor, they're monkeying around with the baseball again?
Yeah. Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
They never can make up their mind.
No.
Well, it's not enough offense, so we need to tweak this ball. We need to manipulate this ball. Call the factory down in Costa Rica or whatever. Tell them we got to deaden them up, or we need a little rocket booster in those balls. And these idiots never can get it right, and so every year, just about, they're messing with the game. And why would people who are the so-called guardians or custodians of the game, protectors of the game, why would they do that? One of the things about baseball that people have historically appreciated, not anymore, is that it was, in terms of the competition, it's been really stable. Yeah, I know that there was the dead ball era. I get all that. I know that there was the steroid era. I know all that. But I'm talking about here in more recent times, once the drug testing's in place and all this other stuff. I don't understand why there's these constant fluctuations. And they are always messing with the baseball. And maybe this explains why. Because you know what? I know a lot of it. See, now the people that would say, no, that's not it. Bernie, just look at the average miles per hour. Velocity is up this year. It is up this year. But I also know from doing the research that starting pitchers are actually throwing fewer four-seam fastballs. So when we talk velocity with some pitchers that are going to go right after you, I'm talking about starting pitchers, yeah, the velocity is going to be a detriment to the hitter. But there seems to be a bit of a movement underfoot where, people are not like, you're going to throw those four-seamers as hard as you can. They're looking for other ways to get hitters out, which I think the game needs, and I think it's going to keep prevent more pitchers from breaking down. But if you look at the way starting pitching is, they're throwing harder, even with the fewer four-seamers, but they're throwing harder, miles an hour. But once again, there's been a dip in terms of how deep on average they go into games. So it's like, yeah, throw hard. Okay, he's getting tired. We can't let him face people in the third time through and all that stuff. And therefore, the average start every year it goes down a little more. And it might be about 5.1, 5.2 this year. The Cardinals are above that because their starters, and I'm not talking about Spartacus, and I'm not talking about Jimmy Buffett. I'm talking about you like that, did you?
Yeah, that was good. You just kind of snuck it in there.
Yeah, I did sneak it in there. Yeah, I think, yeah, okay.
It's good. We're back to normal.
I distracted my own self there. Sonny Gray wants to go 7 or 8. Gibson will stay out there as long as you want him. He's given you 7 a couple times. He's given you 6 every time. Lance Lynn, I'd like to see him push it more like 6 innings. I think there's more there. Mm-hmm. You got to become more efficient. But when you do strike out a lot of guys, a lot of times your pitch count is rolling up. So, but their top 3 starters are taking care of business as far as, pitching deeper into games and not worrying so much about that, that first time, second, or that third time through and everything else. And, that's one of the reasons, and here I go again, that's one of the reasons why Gibson's got more value than even some people that I think are smarter than normal. They don't understand just how much value there is in having starters go deep. It really does make a difference. And it makes a difference in terms of your bullpen. It makes a difference in terms of the way your team competes. Because if you have a starters pitching well, don't you want him in there longer as long as he is physically able to go, rather than bringing in kind of the soft part of your relief corps, those middle relievers. And the Cardinals' middle relief has not been good. But when Gray pitches and Gibson pitches, to a lesser extent, Lynn will still be, he's going to get you 5 1/3, 5 2/3, 6 1/3. They can get you to the best part of your bullpen sooner into games by going deeper. So, when you think about that, because you think about the, starting pitching and all the breakdowns and the shorter starts and the average starts, innings, the length, it keeps going down and down and down. It makes me appreciate innings guys more. And I was looking at Kyle Gibson, for example, because I was reading a piece and it was, these starters can't go. Oh, you don't want to let these guys go the third time through the lineup, right? Mm-hmm. You know what? Let me just give it to you this way. You know what? Gibson's the batting average against him this year when he faces a team third time through the lineup. It's 189.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
And the on-base percentage is a little over 300. The slugging percentage is under 400. And the other thing, and again, maybe this Cardinals front office in this case isn't as dumb as everybody thinks. But I repeat, there's still people out there that will tell you that, well, it's kind of a mediocre rotation. Well, what about do you value innings at all? And some people say, well, I value ERA. Okay, well, look at their ERAs. I think everything's fine. Well, their fielding independent ERA is not fine, Bernie. Talking about Lynn and Gibson. Yeah, but I didn't hear you say that when I kept trying to talk about how Gibson's fielding independent ERA last year was below the league average in terms of being better than the league average. It was 4.13. Oh, you didn't want to hear about the old FIP then, did you? But now they're like, oh, you look at this. You look at Gibson's FIP, that's the real story. He's not that good. But you didn't want to acknowledge fielding independent ERA when the FIP was actually better than the league average last year. So I got you. But you look at where he's been the last couple of years. Third time through, they hit 260 against him last year. It's a little high, but nothing drastic. The year before that, when he was pitching for Philadelphia, 245. See, Gibson's a guy that can get you. He can get you at least halfway through the lineup the third time through. I don't know. I just find it really interesting that you have the national punditry, the pundit class, and the advanced metrics guys and women always bemoaning the fact that starters just they throw so hard they can't go deeper into games. It puts more on the bullpen, and this is becoming a real problem. The fact that the average start just goes down every year. This is a problem. This is an issue. We actually convened a study group with this at Harvard. Well, if it's such an issue, then why do you not appreciate starters who can regularly give you 6 or 7? Why don't you sort of have more? Why don't you have assign a higher value to them for that? Why are you trying to have it both ways? I don't get it. Well, it's just we were at MIT, and we did a month-long study on this, and baseball's heading for a bleak future because starters can't pitch innings the way they used to. But then when you have a guy like Gibson or Lynn, to a lesser extent Gray, or there's other innings eaters too, you're like, well, I don't look at his FIP. His FIP's just a little bit on the high side. You don't know anything about baseball. Same people that are bemoaning the fact pitchers go like 5 innings now instead of 6, or 6 or more than 6. Mm-hmm. Why are they trying to have it both ways? I'm confused by their hypocrisy.
It's I don't know. Maybe it's people just aren't really, if you looking around and actually seeing the numbers like you speak of. Like for today, for instance, there are some day games today. Yeah. And while you were talking, I just did a quick search. And I just did 3 games. 2 of them went to extra innings. We're talking about the Rockies at Marlins, and then the Cubs-Mets went to extra innings, and then the Orioles and Yankees. None of the starters went into the 6th inning in any of those games.
It's something else, isn't it?
I mean, and you go, that's terrible. Well, that's just the way the game is played nowadays. I mean, if you really look at the games that are being played on a nightly basis, and I'm just doing a quick search, the Red Sox starter did not go past the 6th inning, and neither did the Giants starter today. So those are your day games from today. No starter today went past the 6th inning. There it is. It's the way the game is played. And if you have a guy that does get into the 6th or beyond, boy, you have something that's almost as good as gold when it comes to playing over the course of 162 games.
That's the point. There's added value to that.
Yes.
And I don't know why these hypocrites refuse to appreciate that. I don't understand it. The Cardinals' rotation, say what you want, and we know the back end is not as good as the top 3. Miklasz does have he does have his days where he's pretty good. Mm-hmm. I just would like to see more consistency if that's possible. But, the Cardinals are tied. They're right around 3rd in the National League in terms of innings pitched per game started,
Yep.
And that's really good for today's game. I mean, the Cardinals starters are averaging like 5.5 innings. I know that doesn't sound like much, and no one's saying that this rivals 1968. I'm just saying for 2024, you'd rather have a rotation that is capable of giving you those kind of innings on average. And I want to look at something else real quick while I'm on this point. Hold on one second, Jim. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that's good.
Number 3 in the National League. Number 3 in the National League is Kyle Gibson, 6.3 innings per start, right? Sonny Gray is 17th. And that's a little misleading because he was limited in what he could do. They were playing it safe.
Yep.
After the hamstring. They wanted him to kind of build up over a couple, 3 starts. So Sonny Gray has actually stretched it out. But even though they limited him, which they should have, his first couple starts, he's still averaging just under 6 innings per start. And then that's going to be over 6 innings after a couple more starts,
yes.
Right?
Yep.
So, again, Miklasz, for all his flaws, he's still above average in terms of innings per start. Lynn is not, because one of the reasons was because he had that rain-shortened start out in L.A., and then he had another start in the mud, which was a lot of extra work. It was that home game against, I don't remember who, it doesn't matter.
Yep, that getaway
Philadelphia,
day.
maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. And he was a mudder. I mean, that's a horse trying to run in the mud. Since we're using horse racing stuff, that's a trying to run in the mud, and maybe not a mudder. So he came out a little earlier than he would have, because he kind of was exhausting, because having to trudge through all that and work on your footwork the whole time, and it's just not easy. So I think if anything, Lynn's going to start to pitch more innings, and so when he does, this should rise, this average number of innings per start,
I'm with you on that one. Yeah, 100%. They will accumulate over the course of the season with those guys for sure. Sonny Gray has just been lights out. I cannot imagine him being that good all year long, but the way he has been, Bernie, it's like you watch a game of his, and if you're a fan of baseball, you go, oh, boy, this is really sweet to watch a guy come and dominate like this. There's no nonsense. He gets the ball, throw it, and every hitter, before you know it, it's 0-1 and 1-2. That's the count, buddy. Here it is. Hit this one. You're in a hole, and you're not going to get any runs tonight. That's so fun to watch a guy like that, and you cannot put enough value on that right now in the game.
Let me, again, and I want to say this, and I'm being honest. I'm not just doing this to prop up Kyle Gibson. I do think that he's viewed unfairly, and I admit it just really bugs me because, again, I don't understand the hypocrisy. So listen, in no way am I saying that he is as good a pitcher, okay?
Mm-hmm.
As the Cubs sensation, Shota Imanaga. Okay, I'm not saying that. We all know that Imanaga's got better stuff and all that. He's more talented and all that. Okay, we get it. But they've both made 6 starts, right?
Yep.
I'm talking about Gibson and I'm talking about Imanaga. They've both made 6 starts, and Gibson has pitched like 38 innings and Imanaga has pitched like 34. And it may not seem like much, but over a year that's going to actually add up, meaning the Cubs are going to have to go to their bullpen more often, likely more often than what the Cardinals have to do to go to their bullpen when Gibson starts. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's a little value there.
It's big value there.
So anyway, I don't know. But anyway, the Cardinals starting pitching is actually doing better than people perceive. But there are problems. And it also, the good stuff has to endure. It has to go on for the season, not just 1 month or 6 weeks of the season. And I know that. But they're off to a pretty good start. I just wish they could figure out what to do with that 5th spot in the rotation. Because, again, Michaelis very much is frustrating, but let me call this up real quick.
Mm-hmm.
He's frustrating for sure, but he's gone 6 innings, 1, 2, 3 times. He's gone 5 and 2/3 another time. There's only a couple times he left. It was a shorter start where they had to get more out of the bullpen. I mean, he has been an innings guy, but I don't. Sometimes I don't know how to view him. I'm disappointed in him, but it's kind of like every time I think like, okay, he's never going to be able to sort of get back to that level where he's consistently solid. I'm not saying great. I'm saying solid. I just don't. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know whether I should rethink it a little bit. Like his last 2 starts, for example, 11 and 2/3 innings, 3.86 ERA. Like if he could do that consistently, I'd want to see. I would want to see 12 innings instead of 11 and 2/3, but I'll take that ERA. If he could just do that consistently, then I wouldn't be like, growling about him, right?
Oh no, you take that out of him. I think you and I have talked about this one as like, hey, when you get 2 strikes on a guy, finish it. Quit giving all the 2-out hits and runs and things that he's been doing.
And what I don't understand, I really want to see something written, or I want to see something talk about it, and maybe I'll reach out to somebody who can give me an answer. I'm talking about somebody with the team.
Mm-hmm.
From the beginning of time in Major League Baseball, if a pitcher gets 2 strikes on a hitter, the pitcher has the advantage, especially if it's 0-2, 1-2, but even 2-2. That's when you should be able to, especially if you're like Miklasz, who does throw a lot of different types of pitches. I don't know. It doesn't add up to me. Why is he so bad on 2 strikes if he has a built-in advantage and he can use all of his pitch arsenal? Because he's not a guy that just throws 2 pitches or 2.5 pitches.
Right.
He throws a lot of them, and he can change speeds and he can do things. I really don't get it. I really, truly don't get it. This season, I mean, this is oh my goodness. I hadn't checked this for a while, right?
Okay, yeah.
You know what they're hitting against him when he's got 2 strikes on him?
This ought to be good.
301.
Oh my goodness.
How is that even possible?
That is awful.
No, seriously, how is that possible?
Oh man.
And what are the analytics people doing? Like, what is their research department doing? What's Dusty Blake and the new, and I'm not even being like snarky. This new pitching operation they're setting up where they have more people looking at things, studying things. I find it hard to believe they can't come up with something, or they haven't tried to come up with something to alleviate Miles Michaelis' worst problem. Or could it be that Miles Michaelis is the problem because, frankly, he's a know-it-all, right?
He does try to call his own pitches a lot.
He knows more than anybody else, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, Jimmy Buffett, why are they hitting 301 on you on counts where you have the advantage? Would you take a moment to speak to us commoners who know nothing about, we don't know anything about baseball, but could you tell us why they're hitting 301 against you? If you know everything and you're so smart and you're much more of an intellectual than anybody else is? No, I know what I'm doing. I want to throw this.
301 is worse than I thought.
It's unreal, Jim.
It
Seriously.
really is.
I'd have to think that's maybe the worst. I'll look this up tonight or tomorrow morning. I got to believe that's got to be the worst by a starter in Major League Baseball. If it's not the worst, it's on the short list of the worst.
I can't see anybody getting worse than that.